perspective on this is counterterrorism expert David Otto. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start by getting your thoughts on the president's speech yesterday at that high-level counterterrorism meeting, where he, amongst other things, recommended the establishment of a regional counterterrorism center.
Well, these recommendations are well necessary. Nigeria has been fighting insurgency for more than a decade. The likes of Boko Haram, the so-called Islamic State of West African province, but not just that, some kind of a emergence between bandits and terrorists in the northwest of the country. So I think there is an interest for the president, Tinubu, to come up with some kind of a national but regional engagement. Remember that these terrorists do not just reside within Nigeria. They have links with neighboring states, Niger, Cameroon, even the likes of Chad. So this is something that should have come some time ago. But the good news is that they are talking about it now. I think the most important aspect is to see how this is going to be turned into some kind of a strategic and operational reality. For the president to talk about regional, I mean, of course, we already have the likes of the multinational joint task force, which Nigeria, leads alongside countries like Niger and Cameroon. But of course, there are also a lot of support that are coming in from outside Nigeria to deal with these issues. Yes, so it's a good idea to establish this regional center. We have regional centers that have been established in East Africa, in countries like Kenya, a Center for Excellence. So it's a good idea to have these kind of centers, especially with the establishment of the Counterterrorism Center under the Office of the National Security Advisor. Perhaps, that could be an area where the Nigerian president is looking to have this regional center based. So the structures are there. Nigeria has one of the most, I think, long-standing challenges, but also experience in terms of fighting insurgency. So it will be in a better place, haven't done well, but also haven't suffered setbacks, to be able to, share that knowledge and experience with other countries. So it's a good, again, as I said, good idea to establish one, but one just needs to see how coordinated it will be when it does function, and who is going to be able to pay for that. Or is it just going to be a center that is going to be funded by member states that attend?
There has to be, if I hear you, means that there has to be a lot of thought put into it before one is established. But I also wanted to talk about the twin issues the president raised. He talked about tackling the issues of ransom and illegal mining. But I want to stay on ransom, because people don't pay ransom just because they want to pay ransom. They pay ransom because they feel like that's the only option on the table. So what's the alternative to ransom payment?
I think every country must have a coordinated counter-terrorism strategy that includes counter-kidnapping. There is what you call preventive measures. Now, in order for the government to tackle the payment of ransom, they've got to strengthen their prevention strategies. That means stop kidnapping from happening in the first place. It becomes a very tall order for the government to say, we do not pay ransom, which of course is a very nice policy to have. But if the government does allow, considering the fact that the social contract requires the government to protect its citizens, but if it does allow its citizens to be kidnapped by non-state actors, thereby allowing the monopoly of force to be stolen away from it, then it leaves family members who want their relatives back with very little option but to either call for the government to pay ransom, of course, which the government would say no, or for these family relatives to raise this money themselves. So it's all about balancing between prevention, which is making sure that, we don't have the kind of cases of kidnappings that we have, mass kidnappings across the country, so that, people do not have to be in a position where they either have to pay ransom or they have to call on the government to pay this ransom. So to prevent the payment of ransom, the government has to prevent these non-state actors from actually kidnapping individuals or kidnapping people at mass. So this is the only way to do it. And so it's got to be about beyond the rhetorics. It has to be some practical measures, to stop people from being kidnapped.
All right. So, Mr. Otto, I'm going to put you on hold. We're going to go on a break now. And then when we return, we will continue the conversation. Now, still ahead on TVC News at 1, no casualty recorded as Ghana Air grounds aircraft that skidded off the runway at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos. That's after the break. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. A reminder of our top stories. Court orders former Governor Yahaya Bello's 19-count charge of money laundering be served on his legal representative. President Tinubu makes push for regional counter-terrorism center to coordinate intelligence gathering. Outside Nigeria, 10 persons dead as Navy helicopters collide mid-air in Malaysia. In sports, leaders Arsenal face Chelsea hurdle in a run into the title in a London derby. I was staying on the recommendations made by President Bola Tinubu at the high-level counterterrorism meeting in Abuja yesterday. We're still speaking with a counterterrorism expert. He's David Otto. He's joining us virtually. Thanks for staying with us.
Thank you.
So just before that break, we were talking about the issue of ransom payment. But let's sort of move into one of the things the president talked about again, which is, talking about a comprehensive approach to tackling terrorism in the continent. What would that look like?
Well, I think it's going to be quite simple if well implemented. Counterterrorism requires that you have what you call the triangle approach. The first being that you've got to understand where the underlying causes, could come from, and deal with that. The socioeconomic impact or the drivers of terrorism, they call it. So you've got to deal with those drivers, those motivational factors. I mean, what drives people into engaging. And that has to be done by individual states or individual countries in order for that to form some kind of a regional or African-based approach. So that is just one angle. The other angle is to understand the law enforcement part of it, which is to deal with the capacity and capabilities of these non-state actors. How do you approach them? And that, again, requires some level of not just intelligence gathering, but mapping out the threat dynamics of all these groups and being able to ensure that you have the requisite law enforcement authorities to deal with that. Stopping people from being recruited into those groups, preventing money laundering, preventing terrorist financing from taking place. Those are some of the capabilities. But also, the last aspect of that is the prevention aspect. How do you prevent these groups from launching attacks or from kidnapping people, as we've seen in many cases, or from recruiting, people forcefully? So once this triangle is kind of, attained, and then you add that onto the specific environment. Of course, Africa is not one, monotheist environment. It's more or less, you've got 5 regions with different dynamics. Each and every one of these regions, has to coordinate its own environmental attributes that are quite specific to it. So to get a comprehensive approach, as the president said, you've got to first of all make sure that that comprehensive approach, can be reflection within each country. Now the question is, how reflected is that approach within Nigeria and within other regional states? And that's where you start from. So comprehensive it must be at national level, at state level, at country level, before you can achieve that at regional or African level. So
there are many layers to this, and from as you speak, one realizes that look, it is not going to happen in another month because it takes a lot of due diligence to get this together. Thank you so much for your time, counterterrorism expert David Otto.
Thank you.
Well, let's turn our attention now